Sports gambling as a whole has seen explosive growth over the last few years, but other than a few companies like FanDuel and DraftKings, a lot of other companies aren't seeing the profits they'd expected. At the top of that list is ESPN Bet, which has become anything but a safe bet. Last week, PENN Entertainment, which owns ESPN Bet, reported its Q4 2024 and full-year earnings, and let's just say the results weren't great. PENN's interactive division lost nearly $110 million in Q4 alone. For some perspective, that's about $1.2 million a day. What's worse is their lack of market share. PENN estimates that it controls only 2.35% of the sports betting market across its 20 active jurisdictions, with the company now projecting ESPN Bet will have a market share of 4.7% by the end of 2025. This is a far cry from PENN's initial goal to own 20% of the US sports betting market by 2027. In case you forgot how we got here, PENN Entertainment is the same company that purchased 100% control of Barstool Sports for $551 million in February of 2023, only to sell the entire company back to its founder Dave Portnoy for just $1 8 months later. PENN made this seemingly horrible deal so they could sign an even bigger licensing deal worth $2 billion with ESPN to form ESPN Bet. The strategy was simple. PENN Entertainment was hoping it could lower the notoriously high customer acquisition costs in sports betting by partnering with a media company with built-in distribution and influence like ESPN. The only issue with this strategy is that it's not working. Like, at all. At least not for customers or shareholders. PENN CEO Jay Snowden might have made roughly $120 million in compensation over the last 4.5 years, but the company's stock is now down 84% from its 2021 high of $130 a share. In that same time, PENN has also seen its market cap fall from $20 billion in 2021 to just $3.3 billion today. It's no secret that I've been bearish on ESPN Bet from day one.
If I had to pick just two words to describe this deal, it would be Hail Mary. It's a Hail Mary for PENN because they just paid over $500 million to acquire Barstool Sports. And their game plan was simple. They thought Barstool Sports audience offered them a strategic advantage by getting customers at a lower cost than their competitors. But we're now 3 years removed from that deal initially being started or initiated, and they only have 5% of the market. So it's clearly not working. So now they're going to go out and they're going to spend another $2 billion doing a very similar deal, albeit with a larger player like ESPN. But it's also a Hail Mary for ESPN. We all know what's happened in the cable business over the last decade and the pressure that it's put on ESPN's business. So now ESPN, what they didn't do, though, is they sat back and they waited 5 years when sports betting started getting legalized in the United States. Rather than using their big brand to go develop a market position in a lucrative market, they let FanDuel and DraftKings and competitors like that spend billions of dollars to acquire customers and build brand equity. And now those companies don't need to license the ESPN name. They have their own name. So ESPN is stuck with what we'll call a second-tier operator in the space, and they're getting a fraction of what many people believe they could have been worth in the sports gambling world.
PENN was able to spin the narrative by saying Barstool's negative PR impacted its ability to get approved in specific states, frequently adding how ESPN had a much larger audience anyway to provide PENN with more long-term upside. Now, on the surface, this argument made sense. ESPN is obviously much larger than Barstool Sports, and integrating PENN's sportsbook into ESPN's portfolio of live sports rights, daily talk shows, social media feeds, and mobile app was something Barstool couldn't even offer to begin with. In the immediate aftermath, it looked like a bad call by me. I was flooded with messages after ESPN Bet drew an industry record 1.1 million downloads in its first week. It also didn't help that ESPN Bet was the #1 most downloaded app in Apple's App Store for 100 straight hours after launch, accounting for roughly 70% of all US sportsbook downloads that week. Also not helping was Bank of America's equity research department releasing a report after 4 weeks saying that ESPN Bet was trending toward owning 9 to 10% of the market, instantly making the company one of the biggest US sportsbooks, behind only FanDuel and DraftKings. However, the thing about predictions is you have to let them play out. While retail and professional investors alike were excited about ESPN Bet's early success, it was pretty clear that these numbers were being significantly inflated by 3 things. Number 1, ESPN Bet offered hefty bonuses, around $250 for new user signups. Number 2, the 1 million plus existing Barstool Sportsbook users had to download the ESPN Bet app to transfer their accounts. And number 3, ESPN Bet went live in 17 states on the same day, which is a big difference when compared to other long-standing industry competitors who built their business state by state. Considering those 3 factors, ESPN Bet's failure to set download records would have been a red flag. So it wasn't necessarily a huge surprise when mobile app downloads started to slow and even search interest on Google Trends plummeted. It took PENN 3 years to integrate its sportsbook into ESPN's app, but the company has gotten less than 0.1% of ESPN's users to download it so far. On the market share side of things, first movers like FanDuel and DraftKings still own approximately 70% of the market, compared to ESPN Bet's less than impressive 2.35%. Furthermore, ESPN Bet has only 1 to 2% of the market in New York, Illinois, and New Jersey, the top 3 states for sports betting, and they come in at 7th in revenue for those states. One of the big reasons behind the lack of revenue is due to the fact that parlays only represent around 30% of bets on ESPN Bet, while on DraftKings and FanDuel, parlays represent around 50% of their bets. These sportsbooks aggressively promote parlays, like super aggressively. In fact, it's become an unwritten rule when watching live sports these days that you have to listen to one of FanDuel's ads promoting its same game parlays. FanDuel has spent hundreds of millions promoting these bets because parlays have roughly 3 to 4 times the hold of a straight bet. This means sportsbooks keep 3 to 4 times as much money as they would on a straight bet, meaning better margins and improved customer values over time. To be clear, I don't want to place all the blame on PENN for ESPN Bet's lack of success. ESPN has been slow to integrate PENN's odds across its portfolio of assets, and sometimes you forget they even have a partnership, since ESPN doesn't aggressively promote the sportsbook. This, though, was always a risk because the incentives were never truly aligned. PENN tried to do just that, offering ESPN $1.5 billion in cash over 10 years and $500 million in equity warrants to license its name. This meant, for ESPN, it would make even more money if PENN stock increased in value as a result of the partnership. However, PENN's $150 million annual cash payment was only double the amount ESPN was getting from previous deals with DraftKings and Caesars. Not to mention that ESPN's parent company, Disney, still owns 4% of DraftKings stock, which it acquired in 2017 through its deal for 21st Century Fox. That 4% was worth at least $400 million when DraftKings initially went public in 2020, but it's now valued at over $850 million today. More importantly, it also significantly reduces the value of PENN's equity warrants for ESPN, since they already participate in the upside of sports betting via a larger position in DraftKings. The basic reality is simple. This was a bad deal. Not necessarily for ESPN, since they get $1.5 billion in cash and can participate in upside via equity warrants if the deal goes better than expected. But when looking at the PENN side of things, it's clear they ended a bad deal with Barstool only to enter an even worse one with ESPN. PENN's deal with Barstool will go down in the history books as an all-time bust. They booked an $850 million loss on its purchase of Barstool only to sell the company back to Dave Portnoy for just a single dollar. What's worse is the non-compete was written so poorly that Barstool was able to sign a new deal with DraftKings right after the 2023 football season ended, stealing back some of the customers they had given to PENN in the first place. Sportsbooks have spent years trying to find a unique angle that helps them compete with FanDuel and DraftKings. When PENN looked at ESPN, they thought they'd be able to leverage ESPN's audience to attract customers, while Fanatics has emails for 100 million sports fans in its database, and can offer a unique reward system based on its status as an exclusive licensed merchandise provider for all the major sports leagues. But, as I've already made clear, none of these strategies are working as intended. FanDuel and DraftKings still own about 70% of the market today, and no other sportsbook has made significant inroads to taking that market share away. In fact, PENN is already hinting that ESPN Bet's time may be limited. The company's licensing partnership with ESPN has an opt-out clause in 2026, and CEO Jay Snowden said on last week's earnings call that they'll have to do what's in their best interest. Snowden said on the call, "Just taking a step back, when we announced our partnership with ESPN in the summer of 23, both sides of the partnership made it very clear that we expected to compete for a seat at the podium, and we're not on pace to do that right now. We are heads down, laser focused. We have a tremendous plan in place for 2025 and 2026. But if for whatever reason we're not hitting the levels that we need to, then obviously as you're approaching that 3rd anniversary, you have a 3-year clause in the contract that both sides will have to do what's in their best interest." We're still a year or so away from PENN triggering that opt-out clause, if it's triggered at all. But regardless, it's clear the ESPN Bet partnership isn't working as intended. ESPN could have captured more upside if they would have partnered with a sportsbook when PASPA was initially overturned in 2018. However, Disney didn't want to negatively impact its brand at the time, and the 5-year partnership delay potentially cost them billions. They say time is money, which means wasting time is wasting money. As for PENN, this is one of the worst uses of shareholder capital we've ever seen. If ESPN Bet fades into the darkness after just 3 years, PENN will have wasted more than $1 billion in 5 years of time to acquire a small fraction of the sports betting market. Rather than reducing customer acquisition costs through editorial content, the better strategy is using daily fantasy sports as a Trojan horse. While FanDuel and DraftKings spend time trying to figure out how to transfer sports betting customers into higher margin products like iGaming, companies like Underdog and PrizePicks have acquired millions of customers and built billion-dollar businesses by creating innovative daily fantasy sports products. It's too early to tell if this strategy will lead to higher sports gambling market share, but it's certainly easier to convince people who are already gambling on sports to do it in a different way than it is to compete with DraftKings and FanDuel at their own game. No matter what, Penn needs to do a little more planning and make a lot better decisions if they're ever going to find success in the sports betting industry.